we look back on the golden age, and there are people who think that this was an enormously successful period. We were there in the creation of the UN. If you look very hard at some of the articles of the UN Charter, you can see that we were there on the qualifications for becoming member of the Security Council, the part that says you should get on the council depending on your contribution to international peace and security. That's a Canadian thing. The idea that troop contributing countries should be consulted, by the way, is also a Canadian idea, because we were worried about what would happen if the permanent members got to determine where troops went. You can see a Canadian fingerprint or two on the charter, but and there's a sense in which this was a golden age, and we're using it by which to measure our relative failure in the interim period. But think about it for a second. Canada became a member of the G8 under Trudeau. Under Mulroney, we were involved in the unification of Germany, and in the Ethiopian crisis, and in ending apartheid. We were part of the major issues of the time. Now you look at the G20, which is the next great thing. Where did that come from? That's a made in Canada idea. So the idea that we're somehow, that our time has passed and we're little Canada, we can't do things. We're not at all unable to succeed. We have every opportunity, we have every asset, and all we're really lacking is vision and will. So I think that may not have a lot to do with the UN, but that's what I felt like saying.
Well, I already see the hands, so Carolyn, please. And may I also call upon Michel Duval, after Carolyn asks her question. We would really like you to add your own perspective to this debate. We were expecting the minister, as you know, we didn't get an answer, and we didn't want to have a very crowded panel to give everyone a room. But there is now room, and it would be very precious to have also your perspective on the issues.
Merci beaucoup, Marie-Joëlle. That was a very rich panel. First of all, thanks to Jocelyn for your report, which you presented very well in your summary. I hope your report will go all over Ottawa, and there are people in this room who can help to do that, and I think it's very important, the lessons you learn from that. Paul, thank you, because you eliminated in a far better way some of the points I was going to make to Dennis's intervention. It reminds me of the old Pogo cartoon, we have seen the enemy and it is us, I always ask in discussions on the UN, I always ask people to define what they think the UN is, and there's a tendency, particularly amongst the current leadership and the right-wing press in Canada, to define the UN as something else, something apart from us, and who needs it, and whereas the UN is us, and if it, quote, fails, then we have failed. Paul, I'm very inspired by what you say about Canadian capability, and I just hope that we can pull together the leadership to use that package of talents and capabilities and history and get back up there on the stage where we have done so many good things in the past. As far as the military is concerned, Dennis, I think there's some very interesting points to extrapolate from your very clear and helpful expose. The main one, of course, being that the UN doesn't fail, its members fail. UNAMSIL didn't fail. One small battalion in one small company in a small mission got overwhelmed by rebels, and the UN fixed it, including the British backup. The idea that UNAMSIL failed and the one Western power came in and fixed it is not wrong, but it gives an unfortunate profile. I sat in on the meetings led by Louise Frechette at the time that the UNAMSL company was taken hostage by the rebels. And so I know what happened in terms of pulling that together, strengthening the mission, and the British role was key, absolutely. But you could also have asked what was the British role in the failure of Sierra Leone in the post-colonial period. The fragile states agenda is very much a failure of development. In the post-structural adjustment era, the development agencies took on a profile of supporting performance. You know, the new words for structural adjustment were performance and governance. And all agencies, CETA included, the bank included, started building performance contracts with countries. We will put our money into countries that are prepared to commit to good governance and democracy, and we can tell our citizens that our aid money is being well spent. And nobody was looking at how do you get non-performers become performers. And the non-performers are now the bottom billion that Paul Collier describes of the 20% of the developing world that's not doing so well. In fact, it's going fast in the opposite direction. And 75% of the population of that bottom billion live in conflict zones. So it's not that development failed, it's neglect of development that helped to cause failure, and that now has led to this fragile states category. So we have a global responsibility. We were part of the process that created that. We have a global responsibility. By we, I'm thinking of the bigger international community, but I would hope Canada would be part of that, to address fragile states in the broader sense. Canada is doing some good things, but we're picking and choosing. We have a national interest in Haiti. They're a neighbor, so we go there. We have a national interest in supporting an ally in Afghanistan, so we go there. We need to step back and say, what is our national interest in supporting global efforts to reduce fragility in the broader sense? And as Paul so eloquently says, the best place to start is through the United Nations and to make it work. I was very intrigued. I know you don't want to be asked questions about where next for the Canadian military, but I was very intrigued that you mentioned the Congo, because I was giving a lecture at Ottawa U a couple of days ago, and one of the students said, you know, where will Canada go after Afghanistan? Is it true there's talk of going into the Congo? And if so, what would it look like? And I said, well, I've been in Mexico for 2 months, what do I know? I'm not going to speculate on a speculation. So I was very interested that you used the example of the Congo. The Congo is a very interesting example of how the UN cobbles together successes out of nothing. They make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. The UN mission has never been more than 18,000. Now you know that that with rotations, 18,000 is reduced to about a third or a quarter of actual active personnel by the time you count in support troops and in and out and all of that. Now, looking at your formula of 20 to 1,000,
50 million people.
Okay, in Ituri alone, you would need 200,000 UN troops for the 10 million population in Ituri. Now, the UN has managed to stave off what 10 years ago was called the Third World War in Africa, and isolate it to an ongoing, terrible, but ongoing and contained conflict in Eastern Congo, and still bring in money to try to create an infrastructure in the Congo. And yet they're just slammed for not doing X or Y. What they have done with what little they have is enormous. It would be very nice if Canada were to go into the Congo, and I doubt we could raise 200,000 troops. Anyway, so it's more, my intervention is more a comment, but thanks to all of you for extremely rich contributions to what I think is a very important debate, and hopefully Canada will have the foreign policy that can draw on all of these elements. Thank you.
You want to comment, or?
You guys.
Oh, wait, okay.
Just to say, thank you very much, Madame McCaskey. Just to say, I wasn't, I know I